Welcome back, everybody, to the Victory World Cup of VGC. My name is David Partington, and I, of course, am back with the wonderful Evan Wang. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing great. Wow, that previous game was so explosive and so fun to watch. And I can't wait to see the next game coming up between Australia and Ireland. And we are letting Connor take a break because that's Connor's team right there. Connor is the manager together with, I believe, P. Dons, right, for Team Ireland. And here we have the matchup of Ireland going up against Australia.
We sure do, and quite strong teams as well. Both participated in 2021 World Cup of VGC as well, so they are very much itching to get into that group stage and potentially onto the top card and even winning, because this time we have prize money on the line.
Yeah. So Australia, like Connor said earlier, unfortunately in 2021 didn't get past the qualifier stage. So this season, definitely trying to outdo themselves and move on and go as far as possible, even towards the top 16 bracket. And this year they're really coming in with a very, very strong and stacked team. So over here we see from Australia's side, the player we're featuring today would be Mitch Kendrick. And from Ireland's side, it's Mattie Morgan.
Yeah, so Mitch has quite a few accolades there. 2018 Melbourne Special Event Champion, Oceania Internat's top 16, Australia Nationals top 16, and is that 11 times regional
Wow.
special top cuts, which is quite a few there. And on Mattie's end, from Ireland, the 2021 Smogon Season 9 Challenge Champion, Malmo Regionals top 8, Champions Cup top 8 in 2020, and way back in 2017 as well, the North American Internat's top 4 in the senior division. So both these players have a lot of accolades that they're going to show off, and both very strong players from very strong countries.
Yep. So Mattie is a player that we all know quite well in the online scene. Mattie actually like aged up from the seniors division, and in the masters division, he's still performing very strongly in online events, online grassroots tournaments. And
Yeah.
for one thing I wanted to say from Ireland is that in last year's World Cup, they managed to qualify into the group stage, but they had a 1 win, 1 tie, and 1 loss record in the top 32 in the group stage and weren't able to move on towards top six top yeah sorry weren't able to move on into the top 32 bracket. So this year also with a very strong roster, wanting to outdo themselves from last year.
And here we see the teams that will be facing up against each other. So Zashin Kiger and Cinderella Boom, Grimstyle Thunderous and Connor. Yeah, okay, so we've got a little bit of a standard 6 there. But on Mattie's end, however, there is that Eternatus, Eveltal, Incineroar, Blastoise, Rillaboom, and Bronzong. So a lot of kind of interesting threats on Mattie's end that's kind of being rising up in popularity over the last few weeks. And it's quite spicy if I think I know what is going to be on those sets on those Pokemon.
Yeah, we might have seen it before. This was a team that topped the June ladder. It was season 31, and this is a team that was built by a Japanese player and got top 11 in the June ladder that just ended last weekend. So very some spicy stuff, and like in the first game of the season, Mattie bringing such a team, I think that goes to show that he's willing to go the extra mile and try something new, practice with a team that has some success. It's probably new to you because it's a core that we never see before, Eternatus and Yveltal, right? And trying their best to surprise their opponents. And from Mitch's end, that's a very common team with Zacian and Kyogre. Typically, we see the Zapdos in the Thunderous slot, but this time Mitch opts to bring the Thunderous, and we always have to ask that question of whether the Thunderous is Defiant or the Prankster variant, as we see from the leads here.
Yeah, we do. So I can see some low HP stat on that Thunderous on Mitch's end. So yeah, so I think we've got some Defiant there, seeing those move slots there. So Mitch has got quite a few options up his sleeve, like especially if he's got a lot of bulk on the Thunderous. But because Eternatus having that Dynamax Cannon option Kind of similar to Behemoth Blade, does double damage to Dynamax targets, but this time Thunderous is not resisting that hit. So if it's a Life Orb on that Eternatus, or maybe something like a Dragon Fang, it's going to be able to one-shot this Thunderous in the right position. And it's naturally going to outspeed Thunderous too. So he also has Fake Out pressure on his end too that he can potentially go for to catch Mitch if he doesn't decide to Dynamax a target this time. But instead we are seeing the Dynamax from Mitch's end, and it's going to be that Kyogre.
This seems to be pretty reactive because from Mitch's team composition, you generally Dynamax the Thunderous, because some people say that Thunderous actually does not do well out of max, and instead like trying to call some form of fake out coming out from the Blastoise and choosing to Dynamax the Kyogre the Kyogre. Then from Mattie's end, we see the Dynamax Blastoise. Maybe it's a reactive play, I'm not very sure. And one thing to note also is that Eternatus is definitely going to move first here, being a very interesting Pokemon with a fast 130 base speed, and one of the few mons that can actually outspeed the Thunderous.
Yeah, so here comes the Dynamax cannon, but not into that Thunderous, straight into the Kyogre, doing a really big chunk of damage for into a Kyogre hit, so doing over 50%, so that is a 2-hit KO, and we do see the Life Orb on Mattie's turn too. Mitch, in return, does go for the Max Hailstorm. That is definitely going to one-shot this Eternatus too. Change the rain to set up the Hail, but we still have yet to see Blastoise here. It has gone for the Dynamax. We may even see a Hailstorm into the Thunderous here too, but Kyogre's probably going to be feeling a little bit safer in front of it.
Wow, very interesting call coming out from Mattie to call that the Thunderous is going to be like try and do something defensive, right? And going for the Dynamax Cannon into the Kyogre instead. And here the Blastoise goes for what it does best, the G-Max Cannonade, to try and set off that damage over time. I think covering their bases as well, because Blastoise should be bulky enough to survive an electric move even from a Thunderous. And then with the rain, taking advantage of Kyogre's rain and going for the Cannonade. Unfortunately, like when it went for the Cannonade into the Thunderous, it was Hail because the Kyogre set it up. So not much damage into the Thunderous there. But with that damage over time, right, the Cannonade, we see Thunderous actually going down to almost 60% health.
Yeah, I wonder if Mattie maybe expected the Thunderous to be a bit more bulky and be that prankster set, having it been led with the Kyogre. Because if Mitch had just gone for like a max Airstream with his Thunderous and given that his Kyogre speed boost, he'd have been like in a really even stronger position going to this turn. But instead, we see Mitch go for the Max Guard to protect from the very strong Grass type attacks that come out of that Rillaboom. Thunderous goes for the Wild Charge, and we do see the Wakan Berry on the Blastoise. So kind of making sense. Mattie not really targeting down the Thunderous there. Blastoise is pretty safe in front of those electric type attacks, at least for the first one anyway. And in return, we see the second Cannonade come out from Blastoise, likely into this Thunderous slot. And as we know, it's not Assault Vest, and that is going straight down.
Yeah, wow, powerful 2 turns coming out from Mattie, making full use of the Blastoise. In the previous game, we saw Charizard, we saw Venusaur, and here the third starter is coming out to play. And very good switching into the Rillaboom. Yeah, like 2 steps ahead, and knowing that the Kyogre, even if it maxes, you're still being able to pin it with a Grassy Glide from the Rillaboom.
Yeah, I like that too. So it puts Kyogre on the back foot for sure, and there's no potential terrain change to stop this grassy terrain. However, Incineroar, of course, does come in to save the day for Mitch, and he is able to cover the Rillaboom's Grassy Glides this turn at least, which should allow Kyogre to get off another attack here, unless something interesting that Blastoise might have that comes out. We do see a little cheeky peek at the moveset there, which is quite interesting. So we can see maybe at these couple of water types stay on the field this turn. Both are kind of 3-on-3. It's still quite an equal board state here. But if I'm Mitch, I definitely want to be able to get that Zacian in once the Blastoise is stopped its Dynamaxing. So if I've got that Play Rough or I've got that Sacred Sword, it may even be in that KO range for it.
Yeah, so Mattie's Rillaboom actually calling that Incineroar might go for Fake Out, goes for that Protect here to protect it from possibly a move coming out from Kyogre, since we know from the first 2 Dynamax moves that Kyogre is the one that moves first. Kyogre goes for that Max Lightning, but no, not enough damage to take out the Blastoise, and Blastoise is here free to go for the 3rd Dynamax move, possibly just going for a Cannonade to take out that Incineroar, forcing, I think, a 3v2 situation. So making very full use and like using the Blastoise really, really well. Ho.
Yes, and there's the focus sash on the Incineroar there. So this is probably quite a speedy one, it looks like. And we do see the speed revealed once again. Kyogre, followed by the Rillaboom, followed by the Blastoise, and now the Incineroar, which unfortunately does go down to Mitch's own Kyogre's set hail here. However, the electric terrain has now been set, so Kyogre can outspeed this Rillaboom and get another attack off before the Rillaboom can go for a grass move, which is pretty big here because it means he can likely go for that ice move, either the Ice Beam or the Blizzard here, pick off the Rillaboom, and also target down on the Blastoise with the Zacian slot too. So the ball is definitely Mitch's court here, but we still haven't seen the last Pokemon on Mattie's end.
Yeah, I would say good choice, like just bringing out that Incineroar. Incineroar might not do much against any of the Pokemon in the back, maybe. So just going for that fake out into the Rillaboom to try and allow Kyogre to dish out one more Dynamax move. So pretty good damage from the Max Lightning. Unfortunately was not able to take out the Blastoise. But over here, in this position with both Zacian and Kyogre, we do know that Kyogre outspeeds the Rillaboom from the hail damage, and Zacian and Kyogre will be able to go first and really dish out damage. From what you said, like Sacred Sword or Play Rough, I believe should be enough to take out that Blastoise. However, with this Incineroar's Intimidate, let's see how much damage this Zacian can do.
Yeah, so here comes the Behemoth Blade, though. No Sacred Sword or Play Rough, so possibly into the Rillaboom slot here. Yep, so Incineroar ends up taking this hit pretty well. Potentially thinking that there might be an Yveltal in the back there, but Mattie seems to have just bought the one restricted this time. Water Spout, though, is the choice, not the Ice-type move here, and that is enough to blow through this Blastoise and do a huge chunk to the Incineroar too, thanks to that Life Orb it's got, despite being on such low health as well.
I would say it's a very interesting choice of a move. Sometimes you do have that option between Water Spout and Origin Pulse, and you might not want to risk Origin Pulse missing. And I think Mitch kind of understands that Kyogre is really very powerful. The Blastoise is at very, very low health, threatening to go down to Hail, and opts for the Water Spout, knowing that maybe at half health it should deal enough damage. And really look at that damage into the Incineroar. That's very impressive. Coming out from Kyogre.
It is, and this is I think we've confirmed this is probably the only water move this Kyogre has, because we've seen the Max Lightning, the Max Ice, and we've seen the Max Guard. So as we've seen, so once Kyogre's health gets really low, its water damage is not going to be pretty. So Mitch does go on the defensive here. There's a potential fake out from both ends here, and it's the double protect. So playing it safe here, getting a little bit of grassy terrain recovery maybe next turn. Incineroar does go for that fake out and potentially the grassy glide from Rillaboom. Yeah, here it is. So a little bit of a dead turn here, but going into the following turn, Zacian is looking pretty nice.
Yep, I think Mattie, like the mons he brought was one restricted, which is Eternatus, and then the Fire Water Grass core, Incineroar, Blastoise, and Rillaboom. Probably really like respecting the option of a Dynamax Kyogre coming out from Mitch. However, now like towards the end game, it feels like he's kind of running out of cards, right? Because it's only the Incineroar and Rillaboom trying their best to take out that Zacian. With this protect, yeah, I would say that double protect from the previous turn makes so much sense, and it's always forcing the Rillaboom to go for that Grassy Glide into the Kyogre slot. And here, like Mitch gets another chance, a double protect, to take the attention away from that Zacian, because the Zacian is really the endgame mon. But we see an interesting tech coming up from Mattie's side, that Incineroar carries Protect. More and more Incineroars are carrying Protect nowadays, right?
Oh, that's not what I want to hear, Evan. That just makes it even more tricky to take this thing down. But yes, we do see the Protect on Incineroar, which does pay off for Mattie here. It buys it an extra little turn here, but unless this Rillaboom's got maybe high horsepower and a lot of damage output, it's not going to be able to take down this Zacian most likely. So another Protect attempt here. Rillaboom goes for the Grassy Glide, does take out that Kyogre, and I imagine we'll see the Incineroar also go down here to this big blade the Zacian has.
Yeah, that's the thing that Mattie should do. Trying to fish for that double protect from that Incineroar. Kyogre got it. Why not let Incineroar get it? But unfortunately, Incineroar goes down, and we are left with this end game of a 1v1 of Mitch's Zacian versus Mattie's Rillaboom, and Zacian's at neutral because the Incineroar intimidated it down back to neutral. And here let's see what moves Mattie has to try their best to take down this powerful restricted Pokemon.
Yeah, so we see the high horsepower. I think we've seen all the 4 moves, I think, from the Rillaboom now, because we know, I think it's pretty sure we've seen it's got Protect, so Grassy Glide, high horsepower, Protect, so there's no potential for it to like set up or anything. So it was a pretty safe Protect on Mitch's end to just get a little bit of extra recovery, kind of avoid the potential loss with the high horsepower critical hits. Because Rillabooms will often be able to survive the Behemoth Blade, which they obviously can here, thanks to the Intimidate from the previous Incineroar. High horsepower is doing 50% here, so it's definitely worth installing out the grassy terrain to be able to get enough health here. So, and Rillaboom also now goes above 50% too. So, Mitch should be able to glitch this out, assuming no critical hits. But as Connor was saying, the Commentator's Curse can be quite deadly.
Yeah, well, that's a very interesting like damage, right, that we see coming out from like this exchange between these two mons. And Mattie actually opts not to protect, trying to fish for the lowest of low rolls, but unfortunately does not get it. And Zacian just proves to be the superior Pokemon on the field, managing to help Mitch win this game 1.
He does, and quite stylishly too. So that was an excellently played game by Mitch, I'd say. So you like just go straight for the Dynamax on that Kyogre, and even if it took 50% on turn 1, it's still able to dish out so much damage. And even though it got on such low health, the Water Spout also did like a ton of damage too. So I really like the hyper offensive nature of Mitch's team. I'd like to see Eternatus do a little bit more potentially in the next game for Mattie, but I think now he knows a little bit more about Mitch's team. He knows it's a very offensive Kyogre. It's likely going to want to Dynamax with that Life Orb. And we know also that Thundurus has that physical nature to it, so he knows that's also a threat to potentially Dynamax too. So with a lot more information on both sides, this game 2 could be quite interesting.
Yeah, I feel like this game actually, although Mattie's team is very interesting, but it really comes down to both sides really trying their best to take out that powerful water-type mon. There's Kyogre and there's Blastoise, and you really need the correct tools to save towards the end game to take these mons down.
Absolutely, you do. So Australia are currently 1-0 versus Ireland at the moment. So there's still a lot to play for here in the rest of the week. But obviously, Mattie's definitely going to be on to try and get that first win for his team today. So we see the leads once again for Game 2. Ireland versus Australia. If you're just joining us now, Mattie Morgan versus Mitch Kendrick, with a similar lead from Mattie and a slight switch up from Mitch, going for the Kyogre, but now switching up the Thundurus for his Grimmsnarl.
Wow, I think that's a interesting adaptation. And interestingly, Mitch is the one who is a game up but makes that adjustment and tries to go for like maybe a more defensive approach with screens, knowing that like the Dynamax Kyogre puts on a lot of pressure, makes a very good impact in this match, even though they have Eternatus on the opposing side, right, always doing double damage towards a Dynamax mon. Maybe using this Grimmsnarl to threaten something like a Thunder Wave to lower Eternatus speed, or threatening something like screens to make their team way bulkier.
Yeah, if it's a light screen that comes up, suddenly that 2-hit KO from the Dynamax cannon previously becomes a 3-hit KO, which is very big if you are Mitch, because it means you don't have to necessarily target down the Eternatus immediately with a max Hailstorm. You can maybe hit up the Blastoise with something like a max Lightning, and you can like burn kind of that Wakan Berry in the first hit, and with the electric terrain set up in the following turn, you suddenly get that really big boost going. But we don't see the Dynamax this time. It's just the fake out from the Blastoise into the Grimmsnarl, and the Dynamax cannon, which I'm guessing is going to this Kyogre, and it is actually going to do that 50%.
Nice, denying the anything that the Grimmsnarl can do, and also at the same time revealing the option of fake out from the Blastoise. And here, this is the same kind of situation that happened in Game 1, the exchange of restricted mons. Eternatus may be content to do its best to chip Kyogre down into half, for Rillaboom in the back to try and clean up, and Kyogre confidently taking that one-hit KO with a Life Orb Max Hailstorm into the Eternatus slot.
Yeah, I like it. So Mattie can, however, move into his Rillaboom for this turn now. So, and that Kyogre is very much likely in a KO range there. I don't know if like a Reflect is going to be enough to be able to save it because it's after a bit of Hail Chip, after a bit of Life Orb Chip. We'll have to see if it is enough. And the Rillaboom on its own as well, I think because we've seen Protector's not that a V variant, could also go down to Kyogre's Hailstorm in return. So I think we'll probably see Mattie cover the Kyogre with the Grassy Glide still, and maybe we'll see Grimmsnarl go for potential shenanigans to try and save his Kyogre a little bit. Or, as we're seeing in the back, maybe considering a switch.
I think like Mattie really has to work hard to, like with that last mon in the back, we still don't know what it is. To work hard to use Dynamax to their to his full potential to try and come back with this, because the Grimmsnarl is really like helping the team so much with potential screens, allowing the mons to be very bulky. And wow, this is a switch out mid Dynamax, and Mitch opts to switch the Rillaboom out to help take that Grassy Glide coming out from Mattie's Rillaboom.
Yeah, so I quite like the play. I guess Mitch doesn't see a way to save his Kyogre from that Grassy Glide unless he switches it out. So Rillaboom takes the Grassy Glide nicely, Light Screen then goes up, and Blastoise goes for that Blizzard now. Thanks to the Hail setup from that Kyogre, but it's not doing a huge amount of damage because I don't think there's any Life Orb on that Blastoise, as we've seen with the Berry, and these Pokemon on the back here looking pretty bulky behind the Light Screen. Though we have seen a little bit more of the reveal of the speed tiers here, particularly between two Rillabooms. So Mattie's Rillaboom looks like it's the fastest at the moment. Still could be a speed tie, but it has just won 2 speed ties with the Hail and the Grassy Terrain chip.
I think Mitch is really playing like 2 turns in advance because this is such an interesting switch up. In the previous game, I believe it was Incineroar and Thundurus as the support mons. The Zacian and Kyogre is like a sure bring. You have to bring these two, right? Because they are the restricted mons that do the most damage. But this time, like understanding that the Blastoise has a Wakan Berry, Mitch opts to bring the Grimmsnarl and the Rillaboom instead as the support mons. And now Rillaboom does pressure the Blastoise slot with a strong Grassy Glide.
It does indeed. So Blastoise may not even have Protect either. We've seen like the Ice move, the Water move, and the Fake Out. Potentially a Yawn is often carried on Blastoise, so that could be it too. So it may be a defensive switch into the Incineroar here than it needs, which would be fairly safe into these two. Dark type, can't be hit by the Prankster moves, so in it comes. So getting that Intimidate down on the Rillaboom. So Mitch's Rillaboom is not going to be doing a whole lot here. It kind of needs to pivot out at the moment to be able to get that Kyogre back in, be able to dish out the damage it needs to. But Mattie does go for the Grassy Glide into the Grimmsnarl, and it lives on 1 HP. But as we know, the weather goes first before terrain, so I think it's going to be going down this turn.
True, yeah, we call that the invisible focus sash. Oh my gosh,
that's it.
Yeah, actually survives at 1. But what did he do in return? I think he did something like foul play, right? So at least he was still able to do a little bit of useful damage. But good play coming out from Mattie, understanding that like there is no good switching to Grassy Glide, I believe, and maybe Grimmsnarl just doesn't want to switch out carelessly. So taking out that KO onto the Grimmsnarl could be important, but unfortunately Grimmsnarl has already like set the Light Screen in motion. So I would say Dynamaxing the Blastoise on Mattie's end might still be a bit tricky towards the end game. The good news is Mattie still has Dynamax.
It is, but Mitch just about gets that Reflect up at the end of the last turn. So instead of Rillaboom not going to be doing a whole lot of damage to the rest of his team. Oh, that was almost a forfeit there on Mitch. I was like, come on, dude, you've still got a chance here. So Zacian's obviously in a very nice spot now. Behind the Reflect, it's going to be able to take Flare Blitzes pretty well. And if it wants to, it can switch in the Kyogre and take them even better this time. So I imagine Mattie's probably going to switch around that Incineroar. You want to get it out, get that, and get it back in so you can intimidate the Rillaboom and that Zacian, which could probably threaten your Blastoise with a lot of damage. So we've got a lot of pivoting options here. It's very reminiscent of, I think it's Series 9, where we had like 1 restricted, no Dynamax.
That was Series 10. That was Series 10, and that was the format in the last World Cup. Yeah, this is like a throwback.
Really is, until the Kyogre now comes in. So it really does reset that rain. So any fire attack type attack from Incineroar is going to be pretty neutered, but it is going to be that Fake Out instead into the Zacian.
Yeah, I think that Fake Out makes sense. And if this Grassy Glide goes into the Kyogre, what a good read from Mattie. wow, this is so cool. Because this really brings us back to exactly 1 year ago when we played our first World Cup. Dynamax is gone. I guess Mattie still has Dynamax on their end, but making full use of that fire, water, grass core and making good reads at the same time is what makes or breaks the game back in Series 10, right?
Absolutely. A risky switch from Mitch for sure. It wasn't something he necessarily had to do because he does have the reflect up. So he does definitely end up paying for that, which otherwise would have been potentially been a passive turn. Mattie's just kind of waiting to get his Blastoise in safely, maybe after hoping something gets KO'd. But instead, Mattie gets almost no damage on his Pokemon and gets a huge knockout as well.
Yeah, this might be a turn where Mitch calls the Incineroar switch out because sure enough, right, Incineroar has to sort of go back and come back to neuter the Zacian. So let's see what happens here. Sacred Sword goes into the Blastoise. Oh, that's a critical hit, and that removes the option of the Blastoise being able to Dynamax, and and Mitch calls the Protect from the Rillaboom slot and double tapping the Blastoise switch in. And now Mattie is kind of running out of Dynamax options.
Yes, yeah. I think that it's probably a little bit too safe on that Rillaboom because if you're Mitch, you are not really worried about that Rillaboom right now. With the Reflect up, Zacian's going to be taking the high horsepowers pretty well. So I think I'd like to have seen an attack there from him. But Incineroar is the choice of switch in now. It's got more fake up pressure. It's got more Intimidates down. But I'm imagining it's probably going to be the Dynamax option now for Mattie because you want those super effective fire type attacks for this Hedge Monkey and the dog.
Yeah, so let's see what the Dynamax option is. Wow, it's Incineroar. So foregoing the fact that you can fake out and kind of understanding that you already got the Intimidate down onto both physical attackers from Mitch's side. Yeah, I think going straight for, I would say something like a Max Flare makes sense because Incineroar does threaten the KO on both Mons with Max Flare. And what a good timing to Dynamax here. Oh, that's another critical hit. Yeah, because I wanted to say that it's a good timing to soak up damage, use the double HP you get from Dynamax to try and dish out damage in return as quick as possible. So sure enough, we see the Max Flare. Unfortunately, this is going to be in rain and does not take out the Rillaboom, but it does set some things in motion. Without the crit, I would say Incineroar would easily be able to survive 2 moves for 2 turns and be able to use their Dynamax fully.
Yeah, and now obviously the second critical hit Sacred Sword from Mitch's Zacian there, it could be pretty close whether Incineroar's in range now. I think the Zacian is probably at -1 attack now, so I'd imagine it does take another round of Sacred Sword plus high horsepower.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, did we just see the grassy terrain go away? Because then actually it still kind of doesn't make too much difference because Rillaboom's still living a hit from Zacian. So if you're Mattie, you can then still cover the Rillaboom on Mitch's end by going for your own grassy glide. Which should probably be able to get the knockout if Reflect isn't up anymore, but it could be. It's very close now.
Yeah, I think that Reflect is still up, and the grassy terrain is unfortunately that it leaves, but this is still kind of a call on both ends. And here we see Mitch goes for the Behemoth Blade instead, trying to call that the Incineroar tries to protect, but Mattie calls does otherwise and allows the Incineroar to attack again. And Incineroar is really the key here because Incineroar is the one that threatens fire type damage into both both Rillaboom and Zacian. And I think Mattie does well in not protecting. And this should help Mattie close out the game with the option of another Max Flare for the last Dynamax turn still on the field.
Yeah, but if you're Mitch, you can now protect your Zacian from the final Dynamax turn from Incineroar. And there's no Grassy Glide up either. So going into the subsequent turn after this one, you can then pretty safely Sacred Sword into the Incineroar, likely for a KO at this range. Rillaboom can't high horsepower to KO you either, and then you KO it back in the following turn. So actually, Mitch is looking like he's in a pretty decent position, depending on how much this Max Flare does through the Protect.
Yep, I think this comes down to whether high horsepower hits. And I just said it, I really don't want to do the commentator's curse thing, but Mattie's really played very well to make sure, because the downside of a Zacian is that Zacian can only attack one Mon. sure, in like some people say that Zacian have snarls, but then not a lot of them carry snarls, especially this one. So Zacian has to make a choice. If he targets the correct target here is Incineroar because high horsepower can miss, and I think Mattie's really played very well towards the end game to make sure this situation happens and high horsepower hits, and that's a very well deserved win from by Mattie's end.
Yeah, it was. Despite like the 2 Sacred Sword critical hits, Mattie does end up coming out on top and equalizes this game state to 1-1 Australia versus Ireland. So, like, and with the exact same 4 as well, Evan, like in the exact same order too. But he just switched up a little bit. Didn't go for the Dynamax on the Blastoise, but it's the Dynamax Incineroar that ends up winning it for him, which is just awesome.
Really heads up. I think like we might think, oh, maybe Rillaboom is the bulkier one. Rillaboom going for Max Quick could be better. But really understanding that the Incineroar is the key that can take out the Rillaboom on Mitch's end. And I think very well played from Mattie. And I think this like second win is really well deserved. And this is so spicy going into a game 3 here.
Yeah, it is. So I'm interested to see if Mattie just kind of sticks with the same 4 again. Like, I imagine if he's been practicing a lot with this team and he comes up against a team like Mitch's, which is pretty standard, he knows his game plan. So I imagine he'll probably go for the same 4. And he's always going for that Dynamax Cannon to the Kyogre at the moment, which is kind of working out for him because he gets it into Rillaboom range every single time. And as we saw on Mitch there, he had to like switch out his Dynamax Kyogre because of that offensive pressure that the Eternatus allowed it to do. So it sounds like Mattie's definitely got this down at the moment, and maybe it's Mitch who actually needs to be able to switch something up here. So, and as we do see it, yeah, the same lead coming out from Mattie's end, and a little bit of a switch, Kyogre still, but this time with his Rillaboom of his own.
Kyogre has found a third friend here. At first it was the Thunderous, then it was the Grimmsnarl. It seems like Mattie was able to overcome the screen, so really shoutouts to that. And then this time in game 3, opting to go for the Rillaboom to maybe put like that pressure onto the Blastoise. We don't know the speed interactions between the Rillaboom and the Blastoise, and they could be trained differently, so we actually don't know whose fake out is faster, and I think both players really have to make that call here. But going with the Eternatus and Blastoise for all 3 games from Mattie's end, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I think Eternatus like job is really just to go for good damage into Kyogre. Yeah, so this time, with this Rillaboom adjustment from Mitch, Rillaboom does threaten the fake out onto the Eternatus, and we know that Eternatus cannot Dynamax to bypass that, so I think that's a good idea. Let's see how this plays out.
Okay, yes, so Mattie does have the options of that fake out, which is probably going to be slower than this Blastoise depending on how you've trained your speeds, but Eternatus, instead of going for that Dynamax, is going to go on the defensive and go for the Protect. It's trading fake outs here. Does go into the Rillaboom, so no Grassy Glide potential from it, but it's already got the fake out off. And the Water Spout from Mitch into these 2 resisted targets. But with that Life Orb, it does a huge amount of damage to the Blastoise, so kind of negating its ability really to go for that useful Dynamax at this point. So that kind of reduces Mattie's options for Dynamax already if he's got the Incineroar and the Rillaboom in the back again. But it went well for him last game, so who's to say it won't go well in this game?
Yeah, I think Mitch really understands the power of the Life Orb Kyogre and trusts that the Rillaboom, like his Rillaboom is the one that gets the faster fake out. I thought that was a very strange turn coming out from Mattie. It's like a fake out from Blastoise and a Protect from Eternatus on the same turn. So like that really hurt Mattie in this turn because the Blastoise is the one that takes damage, and from Mitch's end, both Kyogre and Rillaboom are still at full health.
Yeah, you're kind of in the same position as you were last time, but worse this time, because you just have the Grassy Glide that's free now. You can't prevent it this time. So, yeah, Mattie is forced to go for the switch into the Incineroar, and again, the potential Water-type attack that Mitch has this time. There's no hit on it yet, but from like that turn 1, I can understand Mitch not potentially going for the Dynamax immediately, because Dynamax Cannon's going to do the same amount of damage either way, right? So if you're able to get off a Water Spout, you might as well. But this time, it is going for the Dynamax, because obviously if you are going to go for a Water-type attack, you don't want to be taking the Dynamax Cannon first, because otherwise it's your Water Spout you're relying on So, but let's
Yeah.
see if Mitch does actually call the Incineroar switch in here.
Yeah, it doesn't. So the Grassy Glide goes into the Incineroar. I think that makes sense to just cover for the Blastoise staying in. Blastoise might even threaten something like Yawn. And here we see the same turn of events playing out. The Dynamax Cannon doing the same amount of damage into the Kyogre, and the Kyogre possibly in return going for the Hailstorm. Both life orb restricted mons just bashing each other, but Kyogre with that Dynamax option is always the one getting the upper hand.
It is, and this the third time now, the turn just goes down to the Max Hailstorm. But may even just be part of the plan, because if Rillaboom comes in here now, it once again will threaten the Kyogre with the KO with the Grassy Glide, because Mitch has no fake out pressure this turn. And Incineroar does manage to come in safely for Mattie, which I'm sure he's very relieved for at the moment, because that does allow him to be able to either flare blitz the Rillaboom or potentially like a parting shot out, get some momentum, bring it back in on the potential Zacian that would potentially be the switch for Mitch's Kyogre here, because otherwise it's going down. So despite the Dynamax on Mitch's end, it's the power is definitely in Mattie's hands here.
Yeah, I would say that Mitch is always like trading the Dynamax Kyogre, because like you have to kind of Dynamax to maybe survive, but maybe maybe like Mitch does not have to Dynamax the Kyogre in the first place, and I would say even like Life Orb Ice Beam could take out the Eternatus. So Mattie is always having a plan in the back, right, to get the Rillaboom in if the Eternatus goes down, to always pin this Kyogre. So I think like Mattie is trying to really stall out bait out the Dynamax coming out from the Kyogre, and he successfully does so.
He does. So going for the Max Guard, getting him his fake out so he's able to cover the Rillaboom going into the next turn. We're going to see the Incineroar move next, and it is that parting shot into what was the Rillaboom, lowering the offensive stats of the Incineroar and getting something in. Eternatus is down, so we know it's Blastoise coming back in. But it's on very low health here, so it's not going to be offered too much other than more fake outs. And Rillaboom is stuck on the floor with like -1 attack as well. And I thought with the Incineroar switch in, like Mitch, I thought maybe Mitch was gonna like see if he could live the Grassy Glide, but as we've seen, thanks to Mitch's knockoff in last game, that opposing Rillaboom is Miracle Seed. So if there are any doubts about how much damage it does, those are assuaged now, because Rillaboom is a very strong Pokemon with that Grassy Glide.
Yeah, I thought Mitch is. I think that Mitch is actually trying his best to really like get out of this situation. I think this is a very good play, switching the Incineroar in, because now Incineroar threatens the fake out onto the Rillaboom, and we do know that Kyogre has the option of a Max Hailstorm into Mattie's Rillaboom slot, and this really needs, like, we now need to see how Mattie reacts to what is going on here.
Indeed. So going into the next turn, it's going to be a little bit of a stally one, I think, because if Mattie's Rillaboom goes to go for the Grassy Glide, it's going to get the KO, but Mitch doesn't want to lose his Kyogre just yet, because he knows that there's a very full health Incineroar in the back, and his main way of doing damage to it is going to be those really strong moves from Kyogre. Even with the health it's at, those water spouts are going to be still pretty strong, and it does allow him to set the rain back up as well to protect his grass type and his steel type from the Incineroar too. So I do like the switch, and he's still got all his Pokemon around too, so he is able to like kind of afford to do this. So we can really see like the power of the Fire Water Grass core here, just switching around, managing resistances. So there's always one thing that's like kind of safe to switch in here, and at the moment it's that grass type Rillaboom.
Yeah, that is so well said. I think this was like what we said earlier, it really calls back to Series 10, where there are no Dynamax options at all, and you really have to make good calls and manage your win conditions right. I think for Mattie's case, his win condition is really the Incineroar, because that's probably the best thing that can deal with the Zacian. But over here, I think it's pretty heads up, going for a Dynamax on the Blastoise to use that Cannonade to set off that damage over time. And I think that does make sense against Mitch's team, and catching the Zacian well with the G-Max Cannonade. However, not doing like that much damage into a Zacian, because I think like Blastoise are usually not trained to be that specially offensive.
No, not particularly. And we're going to see the cannonade damage tick down on these Pokemon now. We've got the hail, the grassy terrain, we've got the cannonade, so there's a lot to reveal speed tiers here. But yeah, it is interesting. Hopefully Mattie's end, he's hoping, I think, the cannonade is going to be quite key in him being able to win the rest of this match. It's obviously not going to affect the Kyogre in the back as it is the water type, but Blastoise is going to be very much pressured to be going down this turn to another Grassy Glide. On Mitch's end, the Zacian is going to be able to live the Rillaboom, go for another attack into it, but with Incineroar in the back, I bet it's itching to come in right now against these two Pokemon.
Yeah, this is a very precarious situation, and from that damage into the Zacian, I'm also not sure whether, protecting Blastoise here is a good call, whether the Zacian has enough health to even survive that Cannonade chip plus the Hail chip. I believe it does, so Mitch kind of has the option to get the Zacian to do damage on this turn before maybe it goes down.
I think it does. Now, Mattie does go for the Rillaboom switch into that Incineroar, getting the attack drop on these two Pokemon. Be interesting to see how bulky this Blastoise is, if it is able to live like a Grassy Glide here. But I think we did see the sneak preview of Mitch's turn here, and I think he is doubling into it. But it is the max guard actually on Blastoise's end, which I do like, because it's probably definitely the obvious slot that you want to target down here. And it's a good one too, because the double up goes straight into it, and Incineroar gets in here for 3. So more of the chip down now as well, which also the max guard allows too. And Mattie's able to go through another fake out this turn, be able to cover potentially the Rillaboom from the grass type attack, and may even live following attack from this.
Yeah, so that was the moment of truth. The Zacian actually survives another turn of chip damage. But over here, I think in this turn, that switch in to Incineroar, like you said, really, really well played. And this is a test of Blastoise bulk. So now I think the obvious thing for Mattie to do would be to fake out into Rillaboom and threaten the Zacian slot with damage. Probably another G-Max Cannonade. And I think we'll have to see what goes on after this, right?
We will. The thing is, Mitch has still all 4 of his Pokemon at the moment, and as we can see, Incineroar's looking pretty healthy, so he has a lot of positioning power here, whereas Mattie's a little bit more predictable only with the 3 Pokemon. But the ball is definitely in his court at the moment, and I kind of like the switch from Mitch here. Get the Zacian out there, save your attack boost for the Incineroar that is looking fairly healthy. Gets the Kyogre in, and if you catch us a Flare Blitz, it's probably going to live this turn too. Rillaboom does go for the Grassy Glide. Despite the Intimidate, it is enough to pick up the KO. Oh, it is the critical hit though. Don't know if that mattered or not. Depends on the bulk on that Blastoise, but being Wakanberry, you imagine it's probably a little bit bulky on that end. So I'm going to say it mattered, but let's see how the rest of this game goes out. As the parting shot goes into the Incineroar, he's going to switch back out to the Rillaboom and then get Incineroar in for another Intimidate on this Rillaboom.
Yeah, that might be a little bit unfortunate, and now Mattie is actually down to just 2 Mons, the Incineroar and the Rillaboom, whereas Mitch still has all 4 Mons. Still alive, right? Kind of healthy, but generally in low health. But really good switch into the Kyogre there, and now I'm very curious as to why, Mattie parting shotted into Mitch's Rillaboom. So he kind of called that the Zacian will do something defensive, either switch out or go for protect. But why not fake out into Mitch's Rillaboom, right?
Yeah, that's true. I mean, you're able to completely cover it that turn. I mean, I'm guessing Mattie assumes it's going to live the hit.
He was confident.
Yeah, so and in either way, you're going to go down to the next turn anyway, because that's your final turn of Dynamax. So I could see Mattie's logic, but I think obviously his logic was not including the critical hit there. So and it definitely ends up biting him. Now, Incineroar does come in as well as this Rillaboom, so double fake out pressure this time. So that's got to be good for something. But looks like Incineroar's probably going to switch in here because it loves coming in here on these 2 physical types, and then it's about maybe stalling out the grassy terrain so this Rillaboom isn't going to be too offensive on the rest of Mitch's Pokemon.
Yeah, I think the Fire Water Grass core on Mitch's end, still being healthy just helps Mitch so much because he has so many options of switching in and taking hits well, and always trying your best to keep Zacian alive, so Zacian will be able to outspeed both Mons once the grassy terrain ends. And Zacian is always the most powerful. This Incineroar from Mitch is still at full health, and here this Intimidate like really hurts Mattie's side.
Yeah, so Mitch is playing nice and safe here. Switch out into the next fake counter, protect, so you've got the coverage for your partner going to the next turn. So high horsepower does go into the Kyogre, potentially to catch the Zacian switching in, and Flare Blitz into the Incineroar. So I think Mattie's going for the right stuff. He needs to be kind of really calling the turns at this point. Like exactly what's going to protect, exactly what's going to switch out to be able to get on top, because as we've seen, Mitch has all the positioning power and all the offense at the moment. That Rillaboom in the rain is looking okay. It's going to be able to take attacks from Incineroar. Kyogre's in range of Grassy Glide, but now the Incineroar is in on Mitch, he can cover it with a fake out.
Yeah, remembering the Zacian's health, I think there could be a possibility like that Rillaboom can go for the Grassy Glide safely into the Kyogre slot to take it out, but instead Mattie goes defensive and goes for double protect, trying to like make a better read in the next turn and see how Mitch responds. But I think the grassy terrain turns are really running low.
Yeah, so another protect on the Incineroar, which is really key here, because it does allow Mattie to now still threaten the Grassy Glide the next turn and keep his own Incineroar alive. And that allows Incineroar to potentially go for like a throat chop into Mitch's Incineroar, prevent the parting shot from going out, because we've just seen Incineroar on Mattie's end is faster than Mitch's one, thanks to the grassy terrain. So I think that's potentially both Sash Incineroars, or at least both max speed, potentially too. So Kyogre does go for the protect this time. He knows it's going to be threatening by Grassy Glide, and potentially a parting shot to reposition, get another fake out in, so Kyogre can do the exact same thing.
Yeah, I like this play from Mattie. I think he knows that like it makes sense for Mitch's Kyogre to protect, so he does go for this play. If the high horsepower crits and maybe the Flare Blitz crits, there could be a chance that Mitch's Incineroar goes down, but unfortunately it didn't happen, and Mitch's Incineroar is then free to go for the parting shot into the Rillaboom. And with the option of switching Incineroar in again, things are looking pretty dire from Mattie's end.
Yeah, it's not looking amazing, and like Mitch is just playing it really safe because he can. He doesn't need to like predict at this point. And like the more turns that Mattie spends like being defensive in front of this Kyogre, like the more turns it is the grassy terrain is being slowly like used up, and therefore Kyogre then move before the Rillaboom, get up the KO on the Incineroar, and then Zacian is just free to do a huge chunk of damage to the Rillaboom. And with the partners that it's got, it should be enough to take it out. So at the moment, Mattie probably needs to go for another double protect here, because Mitch only needs to play safe. And in that following turn, it's maybe be about going for like a double protect on whatever slot that Mitch thinks he's going to go for.
Yeah, so I guess for the newer players out there, this shows the power of the Incineroar and Rillaboom core. It's pretty common in all these Zacian and Kyogre teams, and this is working so well because you always get to switch out and you always get to threaten that fake out. Kyogre is not worried about the Incineroar from Mattie's side and can always just keep going for water spouts safely.
Yep, so grassy terrain now is the last turn here. So,
it's gone.
And Incineroar has just protected on Mattie's end. So Mitch does have the opportunity now to go for the water spout and go for the KO on the Incineroar. However, Incineroar could go for the double protect here. So, and Rillaboom does offer that grassy glide power still, but with more Incineroar switches in, even if it gets it off, Kyogre's probably going to live at this point now too. So it's looking pretty rough for Mattie now. I think he's going to need some double protects or some really hard reads to be able to bring this back.
True, I think that makes the most sense. If Incineroar gets this protect off and Rillaboom is able, even at -2 attack, to take out this Kyogre, I think there could be a chance because we do see that 3-minute timer. But instead, while a life orb Kyogre Ice Beam goes into the Rillaboom, we do know that it's not Assault Vest since it protected, and yeah, like very good read on Mitch's end. From all those turns of grassy terrain and hail chip, he does understand that the Kyogre is the fastest on the field and takes out the most important mon, which is the Rillaboom.
Absolutely. And in hindsight, yeah, that's a really nice play, especially if you know you get that knockout with the Life Orb as well. Because if you don't get the knockout, then it's looking pretty risky, and like Grusker like crits or something as well. But no, a well fought match by Mattie, but it is Mitch Kendrick of Australia that does come out on top versus Ireland in this week 1 of the Victory World Cup of VGC.
Yeah, and we're gonna think back, whether that Grassy Glide into the Dynamax Blastoise, that crit, whether it mattered. I think like Ireland's gonna go back and really think about it. But that's the game we play, and there's really nothing much we can do here, right? But I would say really, really props to Mattie for fighting very well, understanding that those are the 4 mons that you should always bring, and really playing a very good game of VGC in terms of switching and understanding the power of this Fire Water Grass core.
Yeah, it was. So, and what like you kind of choose to support too. And interesting, like Eternatus came like every game and pretty much just got a Dynamax cannon off and then died.
Mhm.
But like it's still kind of put the pieces together in terms of like Mattie's game plan versus that team. So, and as we saw with a few like crits here and there, it kind of just does a little bit fall apart. And when you play a game that is so position based and you're switching so much, you are increasing the chances of those secondary effects and those critical hits to happen. So a game plan that is like seems pretty good. After about 10, maybe 12 turns, like you were saying, like, right, there's a critical hit happening somewhere, and can I take it?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think that was a very, very nice match to cast, personally, in my opinion. And I really thank both players for that. I think I really learned a lot from all these experiences and watching all these games. So we're gonna go into a short break. We still have 2 more matches coming, so really don't go away. And yeah, we are very excited to bring you guys more in this first week of Victory Road World Cup.